Cool. Well, Grier, great to have you on, here today. Excited to talk to you about your business, Advisor Transition Services, and how you've started to build OnBord and that process in. So before we talk about OnBord and how you're tailoring those two things together, tell me about Advisor Transition Services.
Yes, so Advisor Transition Services is a business I created about 6 years ago. And honestly, I didn't really necessarily have a full-on plan for creating it. I had been in roles assisting advisors. I was a client service associate when I started in the business, and then I served as the director of operations for an RIA. And when I finally decided that I didn't want to do the whole sit behind a desk 9 to 5 anymore, I was trying to find a company that was focused on transitions because, and I know this might make me sound a little crazy, I like transitions. But I couldn't find one, which was crazy because I had worked with one in the past before, and so I even tried to find them. And I don't know if it was that they didn't exist anymore, or they didn't have any marketing. I couldn't find anything. So that's when I just decided, well, I know that transitions are difficult and a lot of advisors could really use some help with them. So I'm just going to go ahead and start my own business and put myself out there as a transition consultant, which at the time I didn't really even necessarily knew what that was going to entail or what it meant, but
No
I
entrepreneur ever knows what they're in for, Grier, when you start a business, right?
exactly. But I can say, like, if you've identified a need in a market and you can't find a solution for it and you create a solution for it, then you're already starting off on the right foot as an entrepreneur because it makes it really, really easy to tell people what it is that you're trying to do. Because if you can identify a need in the market, then most other people probably can too.
And that too is why I started OnBord. The same thing. Like I've
Yep.
been through two transitions, right? Merrill Lynch to Morgan Stanley to my independence, which was Schwab on my RIA side. And so it's like, hey, we're missing. There's a big gaping hole in this market that should be solved. And I think a lot of businesses, like if you can solve a problem really simply, like what you're doing for transitions, it's not that maybe you to everybody else, but you simplify the process, you make it really easy, and that's what's really attractive. Greer, how long has Advisor Transition Services been a business?
I started it in 2018, so it's been around for about 6 years now. And I've gone through the roller coaster of of business ownership, just like most entrepreneurs have. I do have two additional consultants that have joined me. One joined last year and one joined this year. So it's nice to have people helping now and being able to try to elevate a little bit out of all of the work and into some of the business. But when it's transitions and it's that intense, still a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's kind of why we wanted to talk today was the man hours going into a transition. There's a lot of them. Man hours, woman hours, sorry, you know what I'm saying here, but just the
Yeah.
the manual labor and time going in, it's a lot, right? And so maybe you could just talk about, been through a few transitions now, utilizing the OnBord technology. How has that, complemented what you're doing? How has it, created efficiencies for your team, but also for, advisors team in transition, right? In that kind of critical point of saying, I just went to zero in the group I'm leaving, and now I need to get it all back, kind of as fast as possible and as responsible as possible.
Yeah, well, I guess I want to start by just saying that I found out about OnBord through a client. So, and I know you know this, but we'll talk about it anyway. The beginning of last year, I was approached by a team who was leaving a large wirehouse firm, a non-protocol situation, and they were really trying to find as many solutions to their problems as they could. They were not really telling their support staff that they were going to leave, although they were hopeful that their support staff were going to come with them. And they were going to have a lot of accounts that they were transitioning. And so you and I met on a conversation with that client, and I know that I immediately said, we need to have a sidebar after this conversation because I need to know more about the OnBord technology. Because one of the things that I have been doing for the past 6 years is trying to figure out how I can utilize my experience and my business, but introduce a technology element to the mix to be able to make these transitions easier. Because the thing is, you're the advisors are never coming from the same place. They're never going to the same place. The technology that's getting utilized is mostly the custodian's technology, which is never really built to handle transitions all that well. And so the thing that caught my attention about OnBord was really the data collection part of the puzzle, because one of the biggest reasons and one of the biggest value adds that my team has to a transition is to be able to start the process of opening accounts and sending things out while the team is on the phone with clients. And that is, if anybody's ever been through a transition before, they know, like, the first few days of a transition is nothing but the advisors and the staff being on the phone with clients. There's really no time for them to do much of anything in the way of sending out documents. And so when you're spending all of that time not only explaining things to clients, but collecting information that you were not able to bring with you, it really is a time suck on the situation. And so OnBord being able to use technology to send a request to the clients for them to input some of that information, and for that to not have to be on the advisors or the team members, and for it to be tracked and put into a CRM, is amazing. I mean, it's in a non-protocol situation, even in a protocol situation, being able to send something to clients and have them fill out a few pieces of information that we're going to need for a process, it just cuts out so much time. And I mean, it's only, that part is only one part of OnBord, and it's only one piece of the puzzle, but it's a very time consuming piece. And it was something that immediately drew my attention.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, again, having been through 2 transitions, Maryland to Morgan, Morgan in my independence, you're absolutely right. Like, the advisor's time has to go to recruiting the business back, right? You've got to spend that time, and so your transition team is working. And we, through these 2 transitions, Emma said, like, look, our number one goal is to say, get a client to say yes, get their information, and get an account open kind of as fast as possible. Once an account's open, it's like, okay, we can kind of gather everything together. They've kind of emotionally made that decision to work with you, and then you go. And so, the point of OnBord, to your kind of point, is get that out to the client, do it in a way, once they say yes, right? Have them get that mobile experience and just get that basic information in. And then one of the sides of the platform, I think that, internally is not paid attention to as much, but I remember all the follow-up of saying a client said yes, but they didn't get us their info. A client said yes, but they didn't sign their DocuSign. And so with OnBord and that experience, we're reminding them gently, hey, reminder, next day you got your text while you were busy at work. But next day we're reminding you again, not obtrusively like bombarding people. But I think that follow-up is important, so that you're really just using OnBord as a platform of routine reporting to say, yep, this is what's happening. Here's the process and flow. Pay attention to it, but that text should lead you kind of back to where you started, in recruiting over client accounts. Yeah, so great. So Greer, one last thing let's talk about. I think, in my opinion, right, non-protocol is like a scary thing, right? Protocol is also scary as well,
Yes.
but at least you kind of leave knowing, if I play by the rules of engagement, I can solicit my clients. All transitions are really concerning. A lot of the institutional groups we're working with, from a sales perspective, that's the first kind of stumbling block they hit when they're recruiting an advisor. Maybe they're recruiting from a wirehouse or someone to say, hey, and the advisor goes, I'd really like to go, but like, repapering is really a concern to me, my team, my clients, what an undertaking. And I've had people say, I'm just not moving simply because I don't want to repaper. So, like, how do you think about that as it relates to not only your business, but also OnBord, right? Because your business is taking that on for advisors, but then OnBord's hopefully making it really, streamlined and safe. So how would we like think about that and combat that from a market perspective together?
Yes. Non-protocol is kind of a scary word. It's still a scary word to me, even. I don't, I am a prepper. I like to be able to prep things. I like to be able to see things in advance. I like to be able to plan accordingly. And so when I am approached about a non-protocol transition, it's it's definitely that feeling of, oh great. The one of the value adds that we have is being able to prep data ahead of time. And in a non-protocol situation, there is no data prep to be done. There are lots of conversations that we can have about conceptualizing what the process is going to look like and understanding the account types and stuff like that. But you really don't know what you don't know until you see it. And so using technology for a non-protocol transition is, we're getting to the point where it's almost necessary, because those non-protocol situations do generally come with other clauses in contracts, things like non-solicitation and just all of these things that make the process um, a little bit more like a tiptoe situation, a little bit
Yeah.
more confidentiality.
Covert
Um,
operation, right?
Covert operation is an excellent way to put it. And so lots of the things that we are doing prior to a transition is really just consulting on what it's going to look like when it starts. But there's you never really know once you start having calls with clients how things are going to go, how long the conversations are going to take, what information that you need to collect, whether the information that you're collecting is something that you are writing down correctly, who's going to collect that information. I always think about it in terms of my services. I have a lot of advisors that will ask, "Oh, well, do you talk to the clients?" And I'll say something like, "Listen, I was a client service associate for and a director of operations for a decade of my life. I have no problem talking to your clients, but is that really the best use of my time if I'm on the phone introducing myself to your clients, explaining who I am, asking them questions that might be awkward for them talking to someone that they've never talked to? Sure. Yes, I can help you collect that information. But is that really going to get us further along in the process if no one is then processing any of the information that's collected? So if you can use a piece of technology that you can explain to clients and you can say, you are going to get this, you are going to enter some information, here's what happens with the information, here's where it goes, and here are the next steps, and the client can complete that in minutes,
Mhm.
then that is such a huge value add to the situation. And you can build in things like non-solicitation agreements. You can talk through with the clients why you weren't allowed to tell them that you're coming. You can
Yep.
have the conversation with them that is still not solicitation, and you can let them know if there's anything else that you need to know, like, we have to have you sign a non-solicitation agreement. And once they sign that, and if you can use the technology to send that, and then it kicks off the process of asking them the questions without you having to do anything, and you have a menu that shows you all of the clients that have received the requests, have completed the requests, have opened the request but not completed the request, then I can go through and I can use OnBord as my tool to start maybe even following up with the clients, or following up with the advisors to follow up with the clients and saying, these are the people who have completed things. Now we can go ahead and kick off the new process. These are the people who have not. Even if a client is not comfortable using OnBord, we can still use the technology to show that that client needs a touch point. So
Yep.
I don't remember what your original question was.
No, you hit it all. It was just about the apprehension of and the fear of, non-protocol, and really, what you said at the end there was great. It's your transition dashboard. It's showing you. I track that with an Excel sheet during our
Yep.
two transitions. Like, okay, where were we with each person? Well, we don't have to track that anymore. That's there. We're going to track assets, everything, so that you really just focus on making that move and let technology handle the rest. So
And
good. All right,
for,
Greer. Well, this was awesome.
yeah,
I really appreciate the time, and we're excited to work with you and your clients, and we appreciate your advocacy for the platform.
of course. Always happy.
Great, thanks, Greer.